Matilda. She came up the front and started pulling on the bucket with the cat food in it. Had it already out on the porch. It's a good thing the lid didn't come off. And she was pulling it by the handle. Yeah. People are going to walk by and see what she does. They'll be like, they have a raccoon. Matilda, smarten up. Are you acting all strange? You're always on guard, eh? Huh? Always on guard. I have some fish in there. I wonder if she'll eat it. They like cat food and dog food. They go nuts for it. If you notice, that's what she's eating. She's not even trying to eat the fish. Yeah. But if you bring home seaweed from the ocean, they like it, and they eat all the crustacean, like the little crabs or whatever's in the seaweed that comes home with. They'll eat it. She has babies somewhere. I haven't found them yet.
The support staff of Monterey, who've done an incredible job working together along with great support from the district to really move through the various phases of this pandemic. And we're really looking forward. Well, it's been
look what they've done.
And students coming on campus again. Yesterday and this morning, it was really special to be walking through the halls and classrooms and see so many of our teachers and students doing what they do together, learning together, laughing together. That's been wonderful. And we're looking forward to giving a tour to Minister Fleming and showing him what we've done in terms of social distancing and hand washing and other ways to keep things safe while our students and staff work together back on campus. And in that regard, I'd like to introduce two of our students. This is Jacob and Joshua Cunliffe, and they are going to be taking you on a tour of the school later today. And if you haven't figured it out already, Jacob and Joshua don't need to physically distance from each other because they are twins living in the same household.
Did you hear that?
And they're looking forward to giving you the
tour.
They
don't have to.
And with all that said, I'd like to welcome Minister Fleming.
They're twins
and I want to thank you and Dr. Bonnie Henry
household.
for your leadership and the guidance you've given our school system as we navigate the pandemic. Welcome, Mr. Fleming, to Monterey.
Like, this is so bizarre, people.
Thank you so much, Principal Andrews. It's a real pleasure to be here at Monterey Middle School this afternoon to see what schools look like under the restart plan in British Columbia. I want to thank Joshua and Jacob in advance. This is their first day back at school, for giving me a tour of what the new normal looks like in your school. I'm looking forward to seeing the physically distanced desks, the hand washing stations, maybe an explanation of some of the schedules around staggered drop-off and pickup times. I know that recess and lunch is going to be different. You guys are twin brothers, so I presume you're okay to share food, but all the new rules around sharing equipment and keeping distance are part of managing the pandemic and are part of the very comprehensive guidelines that the provincial health officer.
A pandemic that has killed 70 to 80% of just the elderly, and the other ones, more than likely, the homeless people.
Dr. Bonnie Henry and her team.
But of course, they don't report on that, though, right? They don't want to say, oh, it's the homeless people that are mostly dying. Of course not. No. Because, it doesn't fit their agenda, right?
Team and WorkSafe BC.
WorkSafe BC. Union.
Have provided to the school system. And so things don't look different, or don't look normal, don't look like they used to. And there's a very good reason for that. It's because it's safe to do so. It's
safe to go to school, it's safe to go to daycare, it's safe to go play in a park, even though they're not allowed to play in the park. But it's not safe. The kids get the COVID-19 or whatever the hell it is at home from their parents.
We have to respect one another's physical space. Physical distancing has been the most effective part.
This is, okay, people, I'm not going to sit here and do this, okay, right now. I can't. One, because we know these people are watching me, right? They've been watching me for a long time. You know, long before, Uncle John went missing, the whole 9 yards. Anyway, this is live right now, okay? And they are programming young minds to be like robots. This is a form of mind control, okay? And they're using public tax dollars to do it. Now, if you notice, those little boys were white, right? And of course, they have each other because they're twins. So they don't feel so alone until one is separated from the other. Right? Now that may or may not happen. But if they were a minority child and the government wanted to continue on with their psychological assessment on top of everything else that they're freaking doing, they're going to separate them. And they're going to favor one and mistreat the other in terms of no, 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 no. Yes, 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 yes. Right? I mean, that's a possibility. They're most definitely going to target minority children in terms of, especially if they act out and say, no, I want to go over there and be with my friend. They're going to get sent, because we already had that problem, people, in this province, where teachers were playing favoritism to certain kids within the classroom. That hasn't changed, okay? Some kids are targeted to be like Ciera and are conditioned into that path so that by the time they hit a certain age and they begin to rebel, as most children do at some point in that transition stage of being a child to turning into an adolescent to become an adult, there is a window of 5 years or more where you're going to have, that parent-teen conflict, okay? They know this, right? So, flood the community with drugs, and the ones that are already suffering with low self-esteem have been conditioned to feel bullied, right? Or have been manipulated into a corner and then drawn into a so-called bad crowd that eventually, as that crowd of children grow up within the public school system, go into their special resource rooms, have their youth workers, their justice youth workers, just, it's an industry within the industry, right? School to the prison pipeline, okay? Some people completely blame it on the Democrat Party in terms of from school to prison, in terms of that pipeline, especially in the United States of America, where you get 10,000 fucking going into the prison system just in the entry bay of the prison industrial complex. In other words, you've got a prison that houses 10,000 inmates that are at some point going to be transferred to other prisons, long-term prisons, privatized prisons that have been bought and operated by business owners. So those prisoners become commodities, a slave, that are made to follow rules from the minute they get up to the minute they go to sleep. Right? This isn't much difference, people. Their kids walk in, they have to have their temperatures checked. Who in their right mind goes around checking your temperature every day? Unless, of course, you're trying to prevent pregnancy. Right? Women that are trying to prevent pregnancy and want to know when they're ovulating might do something like that. But outside of that, nobody in their right mind gets up every day and puts a thermometer underneath their armpit in their mouth or you know where, just to make sure that you're not coming down with COVID-19 and you're going to infect the whole population and kill everybody because it's all your fault. No, they're targeting kids, people. These children's brains are under a lot of stress right now. And when children's brains are developing and that cortisol is raging, it causes permanent brain damage. It literally alters the brain for life. That's why a lot of kids that get scooped up and end up in foster care never really ever recover, people, right? Because the brain damage was created at the time of the trauma. That's what trauma does to the developing brain. And then if you compound that trauma by throwing in that, well, you're just a little brown boy, and I like this little boy over here more than I like you. I'm only human, so I'm not obligated to treat you as fair as I do that little boy over there. So not only is that little boy now, the brown one, made to stand there and be isolated, right? He's got the rest of the class looking at him. They can sense that the teacher doesn't like him, right? Has already dubbed him to be a problem boy, right? And those kids are not going to want to be in his position, people, so they're going to side with the teacher. Okay? This is programming at a very young age under high cortisol stress that is permanently altering the brains of these children. These children are at risk to anything. Just because a human being says, I work for the government, so therefore I am right, I am never wrong, it's my way or the highway, doesn't give these people the right to abuse your children. Now, is this abuse? Some people would say, no, it's not. It's for public safety. But it's interesting how you can have this Bonnie Henry get up and say, kids don't get COVID-19 from daycares. Kids don't get COVID-19 from playgrounds, even though they've shut down all the playgrounds. But I guess that's a playground within a daycare. That's why they don't get it, because it's within a daycare that makes the kids wash their hands 20 times a day each, right? Which is destroying people's natural immunities to their environments. Okay? Not to mention stressing out the brain and infusing their bodies with a bunch of fucking chemicals. Okay? So, but kids do get COVID-19 from their parents, and they're the ones who bring it to school. And that's why they're doing this, because they're protecting the teachers. Right? And supposedly the other kids. But they're not protecting the other kids from permanent brain damage. They're not protecting those children from psychological stress and torment. They're not protecting those kids from being targeted. And I'll give you a perfect example. Back in the day, when I lived at Wally's house and Brooks was in school, my oldest son, and he was like in grade 5 or 6 or something around that age grade, right? And the teacher wanted the students to pick one famous person and write something on it. My son chose Malcolm X. And do you know that they would not allow my son to write anything about Malcolm X? Because those teachers straight up accused Malcolm X of being a criminal, and he was not allowed to write anything about Malcolm X. This is what I mean by targeting. They told him to write about Martin Luther King, but he was not allowed to write anything about Malcolm X, because they wanted to control him, people. Right? They ended up dubbing him the bad boy. Not as in bad, but the troublemaker. The one that didn't want to follow the rules. The one that wasn't white enough, people. Because my child was mixed. Right? So, of course, the white boys that follow the rules, even though they're the ones that were throwing the paper around the fucking room and causing all the trouble, never got into trouble. This is nothing new, people, within the public union sector. It's called institutional racism. These people cannot guarantee that these teachers won't continue on with that practice, because they're only human and people make mistakes. ShaMay, as a 5-year-old, was smacked on the face by a teacher because ShaMay didn't want to come inside after recess, right? And just wouldn't get off the slide. So the teacher got frustrated and smacked ShaMay on the face. And when I went to school, finally, after I figured out what the hell happened, spoke to the principal, the only thing that white principal wanted to do was sit up there and say that ShaMay was lying. But yet, ShaMay loved going to school because ShaMay had a very high IQ, right? But they wanted to control that intelligence. So they knocked it down to the ground at a very early age, to the point where after that happened, ShaMay refused to go to school. And I couldn't get her to go to school, so I pulled her out of school and started to do homeschooling because of them. And that wasn't the only incidents because of them, people. So now they've just made it much easier to target these children without the protection of their friends, as their friends have to choose what side they're going to stand on. And God forbid, they can't side with their friend, because if they do, they're going to end up like their friend. And they're either going to get, depending on where they are within the grade system, expelled and put into a resource room, so you have the next generation of drug addicts to control and to micromanage until they're dead, and then harvest their organs without anybody knowing, because one man's junk is another man's treasure, as the public union sector and their employees get richer by any means necessary, by hook or by crook. Because they're the essential service workers. They're providing quality education by creating permanent brain damage, by overinflating the cortisol through stress factors after stress factor after stress factor. And that's not to mention the backlash that some of these kids are going to go through when they go home and have to face their parents, assuming that they even get to go home, because if they come in with fucking COVID, what? The savior is going to take them off and isolate them into some fucking foster home that's COVID free so that they can recuperate? After that family's home has been torn apart based on an assumption that the COVID-19 was going to kill the kid, when statistically we know that it's happening in old folks' homes because the government back in the day dropped the ball on the old people a long time ago when it came to the care of the elderly. And not only did they drop the ball, but they sold him off to the Chinese and privatized half of the old folks' homes out here. And now are backpedaling, saying, oh, well, we brought in legislation to make sure that these old people have an extra 45 minutes of nurses' assistance time because we know that they need to be helped to the toilet. So we got to give them that 45 minutes more. We had to come in and make sure that those companies made sure that those workers had 45 minutes more with those old people out of a 24-hour period, so that maybe one time out of that 24-hour period, they might be lucky enough to go to the freaking bathroom with the assistance of somebody helping them. So anyway, I'm afraid to listen to this, people. Andre, when they took Andre, he stopped eating and speaking. He was just coming into his language skills when they took him. But when they took him, they stressed him out so much with the cortisol that he literally stopped eating for 6 months and wouldn't speak. Right? Of course, they blame Ciera for that because, you know, she had a history of drugs, but that wasn't the case. It was the fact that he was ripped away from a loving home and put into a stressful environment and made to do things that he wasn't familiar with at an early age just so they could control his behavior. And at one point, they even gave him sedatives, right, to control that behavior, right? And, well, this is almost a similar situation. It's not the same kind of situation, but it's similar because it's separating children from their own interpersonal safety nets, and it's allowing unpredictable adults to target certain children for whatever fucking reason that they want. This reminds me of when, back in the day, in the 60s scoop, when, you know, the white people, the Catholic Church, those kind of people went into the native communities and scooped up on all their kids and then threw them into residential schools and made them do this, and this as they started doing their little fucking science experiments. You know, some of them didn't eat very much. Some were infected with tuberculosis because they were put together, right? They were abused in many different manners. Many of them went missing. How is this any different, people? You don't think that there isn't somebody sitting there writing about how little Tommy is reacting all by himself, feeling all stressed out, crying for somebody, but nobody's listening as he's being punished because he stepped over the fucking line and wanted to go talk to his friend like a normal human being would? And once the child is targeted, people, they're targeted. They're targeted. That doesn't change because it's that mob mentality. The teachers will make the students choose between the child or the teacher. And because the teacher is in authority and the children don't want to end up like little Tommy, they're going to abandon little Tommy. And there's going to be a whole lot of Tommies and Sallys, because they need to guarantee that they have their future Cieras to manipulate and to control. But in order to manipulate, in order to control somebody, you have to damage their brains, right? So a lot of these children are going to get damaged brains from this particular exercise as the adults are taking notes, monitoring the situation to see how the parents, the children, whoever's involved is reacting and what the outcomes are as they're psychologically reprogramming human beings with the fear of the COVID-19, which only the parents can give to their children. Not the schools, not the daycares, not the parks, not the grocery stores, not the doctor's office, not anywhere else anywhere kids goes in this fucking province, except for from their parents. And this is why the school is doing it, because they're catching the parent give their children COVID-19. Because as soon as the kid walks in, has a fever, it's on, people. That child could have a fever for any fucking reason. So now they're subject to science experiments, like in the 60s scoop. Oh, you got a fever, come on over here. Now we're gonna, swab you here, give you this, test you that, put you over there. Tell me how this is no different than the 60s scoop with the native children. I'd like to know. They can't use a pandemic that is basically just removed elderly people from care homes so that it opens up more beds so more old people can go in with fresh money, okay? Because it's another system without taking accountability for the shit that they fucking pawned off onto the Chinese so that they didn't have to take responsibility to look after those old people, because those politicians that run this freaking Parliament House were more interested in their own fucking portfolios when they retire than they were about the elderly at the time when they sold them off to the Chinese. What they're doing to the kids is no different than the 60s scoop. Because they're taking fucking notes. They got their little scenario. Well, if we put Tommy over there and we do this over here, let's just see what happens. Even though they already know that the children are going to side with the corrupt teacher before they will go and defend their friend. Children cannot defend their friends, people. Right? Children depend on adults to defend them. But these children have now become a political pawn to a fucking 2020 scoop. For that school to the prison pipeline. Because we already know that these politicians have created 2 million more poor people that have been manufactured into poverty so that they can be drawn upon as a commodity at the whim of the elite for nefarious reasons. And there's multiple reasons. So anyway, I'm afraid to listen to this. But I'm going to call it for what it is. It's the 60s scoop. We have come full circle to the way we treated the native children with those tests. Right? There was all kinds of nurses running around in those residential schools testing the children as the children were being starved. They were testing the children just to see what starvation would do to them. They were testing the children just to see how fast they would get tuberculosis because they were put in a room full of kids that had it. They wanted to know how long it would take an uninfected child to get it in the room with the other ones. As the teachers, the nurses, were the essential workers were running around taking their fucking notes. This is no different. And they will target the Tommies and the Sallys, regardless of their ethnic heritage. And if one wants to rebel and write something about Malcolm X, trust me, they will be targeted. Right? If one has a learning disability like Ciera back in the day when she was young, those ones will be targeted for the next, well, we've got this resource room over here, and that's where we're going to send them to. Because it guarantees 15 years of drug addiction. Because by the time they get into these resource rooms, they're already addicted to drugs. They're on Ritalin, all these other things. So by the time they're rebellious teenagers, it's a given that they're going to rebel, throw away the Ritalin, and hit the streets. And then it just sustains that underground economy as those essential workers pretty much capitalize off of it, people. Anyway, I'm going to leave it on this because I'm going around in circles. Okay, this is the 60s scoop all over again.